Uh, at the risk of stating the obvious, something I probably do a lot in sermons, there are many heavy hearts across our country. People are grieving the devastating violence in Tumbler Ridge. Lives have been lost, families have been shattered, and a community has been wounded in ways that are not going to heal quickly. And even at a distance, events like this disturb something deep within us. They settle into our bodies. They leave us carrying emotions that aren't always easy to name or carry, and we're feeling all the feels: sorrow, confusion, fear, even anger. And I think it's really important to say gently and clearly, there is nothing shameful about feeling any of those things. Today I want to talk about anger, though. Anger is not the opposite of love, and very often anger is what love feels like when it encounters harm. When something precious is threatened, a young life, a body, a community, a future, love does not remain cool and detached. Love aches, love trembles, love burns. And the question isn't whether anger sometimes bubbles up in us. The question is what we do with the anger once it arrives. And our gospel readings today offer us two sort of extraordinary glimpses into this mystery. And one takes place on a mountaintop blazing with light, and the other unfolds in a synagogue that's tense and watchful and heavy with silence. And remarkably, both reveal something essential about who God is and about who we are. In the reading that Abraham read, thank you, dear, on the mountaintop, Jesus is transfigured before Peter and James and John, and his appearance changes. His clothing becomes radiant, fabulous even. And Moses and Elijah stand beside him like living echoes of sacred history, and understandably, the disciples are overwhelmed and confused and disoriented and deeply afraid. And then a cloud overshadows them, and they're enveloped in the cloud. Now, where I grew up, near San Francisco, the area is kind of famous for its fog. And I grew up just north of San Francisco in the little town of Mill Valley at the foot of a mountain, Mount Tamalpais. And the fog would come in over the mountain almost like a wave or a waterfall. And you'd be up on the mountain and it'd be all sunny and you'd be looking at the beautiful view from the mountaintop, and then all of a sudden the fog would fall over the ridge and you couldn't see your hand in front of your face. So when I picture this event in the Gospel of Mark, that's what I see. Suddenly enveloped in a cloud, and from the cloud comes a voice. This is my beloved, listen to him. And we often imagine the most important part of this story is the light, the transfiguration, the fabulousness. But in rereading this passage this week, I began to think that perhaps the most important moment is the voice. Because the light startles and the voice interprets. And without the voice, the disciples simply witness something strange and mystical and terrifying, but the voice tells them what this dazzling moment means. Beloved. Beloved. Not accomplished, not triumphant, not flawless. Beloved. And belovedness is not earned, belovedness is spoken. God does not tell Jesus who to become. God tells him who he already is, beloved. And that matters because we inhabit a world that relentlessly makes worth conditional, that makes love conditional. And we're taught that worthiness and value have to be proven, that identities have to be justified, and they don't. The legitimacy depends on conformity and performance and success and certainty, and that's wrong. Because on the mountain, there's no test, no achievement, no qualification, only sudden recognition of what already is. This is my beloved. And transfiguration is not about becoming someone else. It's about being seen for who you truly are in the light of God. God doesn't erase what's real, God reveals what's true. And we are, all of us, truly seen for who we are in the light of God. And that revelation does not remain confined to mountaintops, because in Mark's gospel, we also encounter another moment of unveiling, not of radiant light, but of burning emotion. And in the reading that I read, Jesus enters a synagogue, and a person's there with a withered hand, and the room is thick with tension, and people are watching, not with hope, but with suspicion, waiting for a mistake, a violation, a reason to accuse. And Jesus asks one devastatingly simple question: is it lawful to do good or harm on the Sabbath? To save life or to destroy it? And the people around were stunned into silence. And then the gospel tells us something startling. Jesus looks around them, at them, with anger, grieved at their hardness of heart. Anger. Not mild irritation, not abstract disappointment, anger. Anger joined to grief. Anger born of compassion, because love is standing in front of suffering, and those entrusted with care cannot see it. And I think this may be one of the most important emotional revelations in the gospel, in the entire gospels. And I think sometimes when we try to think of an example of Jesus being angry, we think of him flipping tables over in the temple, calling out the money changers and smacking them upside the head. But in this passage, in Mark's gospel, we see Jesus' anger in perhaps a slightly different light. Jesus' anger isn't reckless, it's not uncontrolled, it's not cruel, it's not wounded ego or pride inflamed, as so often is the case with human anger. It's the anger of love encountering indifference, the anger of mercy confronting rigidity, the anger that arises when a human being's pain is treated as secondary to rules or categories or comfort. And just as an aside, to give a current example, it's the kind of anger that arises when the suffering of human trafficking victims is treated as secondary to the stock market. But I digress.
Yes, preach.
Jesus is angry because he cares, because someone's wholeness is being weighed against some ideology, because a human life is being obscured by hardened hearts. And I hate to say it, but I see a bit of that today in the responses of some people to what happened in Tumbler Ridge. They're weighing somebody's wholeness against some ideology. And this is where our two stories meet. On the mountain, belovedness is declared, and in the synagogue, belovedness is defended. And the same divine light that radiates as light, divine love that radiates as light, also burns as anger, which means something important for us. Anger itself is not the problem. Anger is fire, and fire is dangerous only when it loses its relationship to love. Anger is dangerous when it's not directed towards love and justice. And we become angry because somewhere deep within us, we know the world and all within it is beloved. We know lives are beloved. We know vulnerable bodies are beloved. We know dignity is beloved. And anger is often love refusing to accept what diminishes life. And yet, like the light on the mountain, anger is never meant to be a permanent dwelling place. I kind of love what the Peter disciple, what the disciple Peter does in this account. Actually, I don't so much love it as I kind of identify with it, because it clearly says that Peter does not know what the heck to say, so naturally he opens his mouth and says something stupid. And I cannot tell you how many times I have done that, so apparently I am in good company. Peter wants to build shelters and remain in the glory, but the mountaintop is a place of revelation, not residence. So Jesus leads the disciples back down the mountain because revelation isn't given for escape, it's given for endurance, for life in the long haul. And anger needs something similar. Anger needs a mountain. It needs a space where it can be named honestly, where it can breathe, where it can be held in the presence of God. Because anger that is denied or dismissed turns inward and corrodes. Anger that is constantly inflamed consumes. And anger untethered from love becomes cruelty. But anger that remains tethered to love can become clarity and courage and compassion. Notice something else about both of these gospel scenes. In each, what is revealed is not a new identity, but a deeper truth. Jesus doesn't become someone else on the mountain. The person with the withered hand doesn't become someone else in the synagogue. What emerges is wholeness and recognition and lives that are more fully visible. And the work of God in our lives, the work of God that travels with us on life's long and winding road, is never an erasure of who we are or who we were or who we're becoming. That's revelation. And this is a truth that echoes far beyond these ancient stories. And there are many of us in this world who know intimately what it is to struggle toward visibility, to claim the difficult, sacred work of living more truthfully, more openly, more fully as who we are, and to allow what has always been present, though perhaps hidden or misunderstood, to be seen in the light. And that journey, however mysterious or confusing, however misunderstood by others, is not foreign to the gospel, because the gospel is filled with stories of unveiling, of becoming, of lives restored, of identities honored, of human beings called out of diminishment into dignity. And the tragedy of hardness of heart is not that it breaks rules, it's that it prevents us from recognizing belovedness, ours and others, when it stands right in front of us. And Jesus' anger in the synagogue is directed not at difference, not at vulnerability, but at the refusal to see another person's full humanity, at the prioritizing of categories over compassion and certainty over mercy. And perhaps that's a word for all of us, because hardness of heart is not a relic of ancient religious leaders. It's a perennial human temptation. Anytime we value comfort over care, anytime we fear what we don't understand, anytime we reduce a person to an idea rather than encounter them as beloved, then we drift toward that same tragic blindness, that same hardness of heart. And the transfiguration and the healing in the synagogue together reveal a God who is neither cold nor indifferent, a God of radiant love, a God of fierce compassion, a God whose light reveals belovedness and whose anger defends it. And this means our own anger, too, can be transfigured, not discarded, not indulged, but shaped. Anger is fire, and fire can destroy or fire can warm. Fire can burn the house down, or fire can rest safely in the hearth, and the presence of God is the hearth. We walk down the mountain in a world that is still wounded. You may have noticed. But it's also still beautiful, still trembling with both grace and grief. We carry sorrow, we carry fear, we carry anger, but before all else, beneath all else, there's a voice that continues to speak. beloved. Not because we've earned it, not because the world is safe or sensible, but because love is the deepest truth of creation. The Transfiguration shows us something crucial about intense experiences. They're not given to remove us from the world, but to sustain us within it. And the disciples aren't spared future suffering by the light. They're strengthened for the road ahead. And perhaps belovedness works the same way. To know oneself as beloved doesn't erase grief or fear. It doesn't erase anger, but it prevents those things from becoming our only truth. And belovedness is what allows us to carry the fire without being consumed by it. And so we find ourselves, like the disciples, walking down the mountain, back into a world that's still beautiful and still broken, still radiant and still wounded. A world where joy and horror somehow coexist, where love and loss remain intertwined. And we don't walk back down naive. We walk back down having heard a voice, "This is my beloved." And if belovedness is spoken over Christ, it's spoken over all creation, over human beings, over frightened disciples, over grieving communities, over all those who mourn and who fear and who struggle to carry things too heavy to bear alone. It's spoken over you. So perhaps the invitation this weekend is not complicated. Carry all the feels. Carry our anger, but don't let it devour us. Carry our grief, but don't let it define us. Carry our fear, but don't let it isolate us. And bring them, as we're able, into the light. And listen for the voice that still speaks, quietly, stubbornly, tenderly, beloved. Amen.